So let me talk about, I'll show you that in a minute, see if I can get to my remote desktop. There's a couple other things with restore. We also have this thing called operational restore, probably the worst named feature in the history of NetBackup, and that covers a lot. So, but anyway, this is operational restore. It's a browser-based restore. We have a new feature in 7.5 where when you catalog data, typically that data is cataloged and associated with a specific virtual machine or physical system, right? But you know all the backups associated with that system, but you don't know the backups associated with the systems right next to it. So, in other words, I may have 1,000 virtual machines, and I can search the virtual machine backups of system VM12, but I can't search VM13. I have to manually go in and search all of those. The search feature allows us to be able to do search files across the entire environment. So if I have a file and I said it was on VM12, it turns out it was on VM14, I can search across all of my clients because we catalog the information and we index that across all of those. So that's the operational restore. But along with that, we have these capabilities of being able to restore, do advanced restore, so we can specify a specific client, we can specify a group of clients, we can use wildcard searches. A lot of that was available before, but now we can, this is where we specify multiple clients. This is a browser-based. You can give specific permissions to people, like if you want to give permissions to your virtual machine administrator, you can do that. These are the files that are listed. So we have this file that may be listed. We can click on this and find all versions of that file. So you can find all versions that might exist on your virtual machine or physical system, and all versions that might exist on other systems. So very, very powerful. But again, you can provide explicit support. So you can say to the virtual machine administrator, hey, you can do this stuff, but you can only do these. I don't want you to have access to my Oracle database that I'm running on a big, fast physical system. This is another key to this is, remember we talked about storage lifecycle policies and writing this data to multiple destinations? This shows us where those destinations are and what technology was used. So with replication director, we could have the data that exists on a storage array. We could have the data that exists in the cloud. We could have data that exists on our dedupe target. This shows us how many copies we have and exactly what date they're from, what backup date they're from, and what storage technology was used. So we can select from any one of those copies the one that makes the most sense, whether it's a virtual machine, entire virtual machine restore, or an individual file. So, okay, so let me see. Yes, I know. I'm almost done here. I'm gonna just go through these much of the slides, and then we'll do the single file restore stuff. Okay? Yeah, that's what I mean. Okay, so a couple other things. vCenter, providing information inside the vCenter, inside the vSphere client. So essentially what we do is this is part of the API that we're able to write to vCenter and create events, send events to vCenter. So what this does is this sends events to vCenter. The event can be error only, every event, or it can be nothing. So if you don't want to send events, you can do that. We also enter information associated with the send information associated with custom attributes. So we create a custom attribute called NetBackup backup, the last backup. And essentially what that does is that reports, you can look at the virtual machine directly, see when the last backup of that virtual machine occurred. We also have a plugin that's coming out that's just out in very shortly here that actually will report specific information related to every virtual machine backup. So essentially you can click on a virtual machine, find out every instance of a backup that occurred with that virtual machine, and it's a great reporting tool. So you can look at your entire virtual machine environment as well.
You mentioned vCenter plugins.
Yes.
How far are you, as an organization, prepared to push that line to the point that you can actually configure and set up backup for a group of VMs or a VM directly from Virtual Center without ever touching your UI?
We do that in backup already. We do that in backup already. So we got a plugin which puts a tab in vCenter. And you can manage your backups. In fact, you could do it with AppHA as well.
Sure.
There's those two plugins which can, and you can manage your application availability and your backups direct from vCenter.
And is that true of NetBackup as well?
Not yet, but
Not
we're
yet.
we're.
So
we're
why is there a disconnect between some of the integration we're getting from backup exec to the integration we get from
it's some of it is priorities. I mean, we have limited resources, so we set the priorities. That is, we've always considered that an important priority, but it just, I mean, we never, always realized that, virtual machine administrators are going to demand that, and it's just, just didn't have enough resources. That's all.
Sometimes it's just that. Quite often you'll see stuff that's in that backup will appear in backup exec, and the same thing happens vice versa.
Part of that, yeah.
So we're part of the same business unit.
And we're all different release trains, so it
Yeah.
occurs back and forth.
Sure.
We also support a lot more applications and operating systems, so the testing process takes a lot longer for NetBackup.
So for us, we
I'm going to say though on the customer side, that's going to be a little frustrating for them because if they're, especially if they're in a growing environment and they're outgrowing back of the ZEC, and then they, they need to be able to scale that product line. They're like, okay, let's look at NetBackup. Well, then that's going to cause them to really look at some competition. Because if they need those features or they need more features and back of ZEC has them and NetBackup doesn't, I don't know. I mean, I'm just
that because I have customers always asking me to have one. They either have backup exec and want to go to something else, or they have NetBackup and.
Well, backup exec has always been like an SMB solution.
But
you can kind of see where a plugin would be more valid or more appropriate with backup exec, where you may be focusing that product on a skill base which is not as detailed, they've got too many other things and they want an easy way to do backups.
So chances are that, when George and I, we did VM World in
Copenhagen.
Twice, didn't we?
Yep.
I can't remember.
Yep.
But the first time we asked the question about, how many in the room are, the backup guys and how many in the room are VMware guys and where do they mix, it was very, very split. Very, very split. The second time we did it, there was kind of more of them, but you're right, they were more kind of, so the VMware guys was the same as the backup guy. And that happened, that was what, I can't remember the year, that was 2010.
Yeah, 10, I think.
And, so in an SMB situation, the VMware administration,
And therefore it's more applicable.
it's the same as the back, so it's more applicable.
Well, actually, the SME as well. When you start getting to the medium and large enterprises, the really good ones have backup, virtualization, storage, security, networking all on the same team. So they all want the same view. So if you have them separate, guaranteed for failure, but if you have them on the same team, you're probably on better.
Generally speaking, yeah, I mean that makes sense. But generally speaking, we find these guys are still horribly siloed.
Well, the company I was talking about was 80% virtualized, and they were hitting 90 that year. And the only reason why they're not as 100% is because they have a couple of pieces of big iron they didn't know how to virtualize at that time.
So it's always a challenge for customers, and as we've been sitting here for the last few hours, have to keep remembering in my head, we're talking about NetBackup, we're not talking about backup.
Yeah.
If you leave historical factors behind, like, hey, we have two products and they've been there a while, if you were starting again, and this is from the customer perspective, what are the technical reasons of why you would need two products? Do you believe that you need to solve the backup problem in different ways for different environments, and therefore we need two products?
Yes.
Why two? And so what are those reasons of
This is the question about this customer. They were looking at, do I need a virtualization specific backup tool? And this is when NetBackup just started with the storage API, so you guys had it. But at the same time, they're still questioning, do I need something that is really, truly virtualization specific?
But both your products do physical and virtual.
Yeah, now they do.
So why the two products?
NetBackup units. So if you're truly heterogeneous, I mean, you can sort this out pretty quickly with a couple of questions. Their units fundamentally came from Solaris. Actually came from mainframe before that, but came from Solaris. That's where we build the business. Whereas backup exec is Windows only, and always has been. The tests that these guys have to go through, Christine just mentioned that, it's about 70, 80 tests. We have to do 8.
It's
equivalent to the same thing with Linux and Windows.
But there are Windows installations for NetBackup.
Oh, sure,
Of
yeah.
course, yes.
No, fully support
Yeah.
masters, everything, clients, the whole thing, of course.
If you want centralized management, global centralized management, probably better to go that way than it is to go with backup exec. Its master server concept manages wide area management much better than backup exec does. Backup exec tends to be smaller installation. NetBackup does scale down just like backup exec scales up. I mean, I think we're backing out our largest installation, 13,000 servers.
Yeah, right around that.
Yeah. So it's not like it doesn't scale up. It's just, generally speaking, it fits into that market space, and NetBackup fits into the larger enterprise. It's more likely that you're going to have a dedicated backup admin with those kinds of installations.
Kind of stems from the old NT days where it kind of spilled over.
Yes, it does. It
Yep,
has spilled.
exactly.
And the reporting in the center is very sophisticated. Backup exec has reporting as well, but it doesn't go to the same level. The guys that very much the backup exec sells to range between the same sort of person that we've loved and known for a long time, through to some guy who just wants to hit a button.
But they sound like answers to the question, we have two products, why would I select between the two of them? What's the differences? Rather than, is there a need for two products?
Yeah,
yeah, that's a great question. Is there a need? I don't think there is.
I mean, from a management side, management always asks for a product that scales all the way from one to the next, and they want to be able to say, hey, we'll maybe have a guy that's dedicated to that, but I want to be able to pick any out of 30 people to just do the daily stuff if a guy's out on vacation, if he's out sick, you know what I mean? So you need to have a product that is unified in the front end, but you can get that advanced functionality if you need to.
Which management is saying, I just want one guy? Management is saying, I just want it to work, regardless of people. I don't want any person to be able to have to deal with this daily. It's an exception basis only. They just wanted to say, hey, do my backups, make sure it restores, I'm done.
Then there's always the transition from an SMB to an enterprise where you have tons and tons of tapes done through backup exec, and now you have to get them into NetBackup when you switch over to that.
Or you don't use tape at all, and you just use disk to disk to disk and store it in the cloud, which a lot of people are starting to do now. So how do I get that data back in from one to the other? How do I migrate from wherever I am to the next level up? If I can't do that easily, there's a good chance I won't choose it.
And the price point is significantly greater. Your SMB is going to say, oh, we need to scale this. Well, we can't do NetBackup right now. We got it in backup exec.
Yeah.
I mean, historically, I don't know what the price point
I
is
mean,
nowadays.
I think you've hit the point there. If we were to just say, okay, well, let's dump NetBackup, this backup exec is obviously a better product. We'd have to scale that up. We'd end up, if you went with NetBackup, you'd end up with a NetBackup Lite. So I think there is a reason for having two. It's not just a legacy thing. Backup exec does some fundamental things that are very easy for those kind of SB, SMB type customers, and NetBackup is very specifically, it does everything. It does and it comes in one great big
Their
package.
use case is fundamentally different.
Yeah, so with backup exec, the whole licensing concept is completely different. With NetBackup, you pay your price, your site license, and someone comes along with 14 DVDs and says, go fill your boots. With backup exec, it's like, what's in your environment? What do you want to back up? Right. Here's your core BE server. You want to add SQL Server to that as an agent. You want to add deduplication option to that. You want to put archiving in there. You want to whatever. So you build out a solution that is probably more palatable for your SMB who hasn't got bucket loads of money. Yeah, is that kind of answer the question?
I think another way of looking at it from what Rhodas was saying just a moment ago is to forget about we have different customers with different demands. Internally, that puts a strain on your resources to have two product streams that you have to develop, port from one to another, keep up to date and patch. If there was just one product which was then delivered with a shell that was
Function was disabled.
or
by license.
then you would be able to invest more of your eggs in that particular product stream rather than feeling split between
we
two.
do invest single technological items within those two products. So deduplication, both sets of deduplication is exactly the same. Although we said, we're talking about NetBackup here, you're talking about backup exec as well. I mean, in all seriousness, I was going to get up and say, I'm from backup exec, what he said, and sit down again.
That's good enough for us.
Actually,
Where's left?
yeah, I came up. So,
No, but when you were talking earlier about, well, we don't have a plugin, but there is a plugin for backup exec, can I ask why there wasn't a plugin? Well, we ran out of resources to QA that. We've got a more rigorous cycle of things to test against.
Well,
In a way, by having that second product, that's consuming a resource that could be used against one product to address that particular issue.
I mean, I think
But you still have a problem when you look at a plugin like that. The customer needs and the functionality that have to match
Differs
up.
from one to another,
It's
yeah.
different, so you still end up in that same scenario because we're going to be using the same code base to produce the second plugin. It's just it has to expose different functionality.
The analogy I would use for that particular situation is that the storage vendors, like the NetApps and the EMCs of the world, you can manage storage by cranking up their management systems, which if you're a VMware administrator whose primary job is VMware admin, you tend to want to go in there as little as possible and get out as quickly as possible. What's nicer is to actually use a plug-in to Virtual Center that will do 99% of the tasks that you want to do. And then if you are feeling lucky punk and want some advanced functionality, then you go to that admin tool. But it's still the same platform, it's still a NetApp array or an EMC array, but I as an individual can choose what level of tick off boxes and questions and UI layers to go through, depending on the kind of individual I am. If I am all bells and whistles, I will go to their management tools to have all the options and features. But if I just want to quickly provision a LUN for 32 of my ESX hosts in a cluster in vSphere, I'm going to use the plugin because it is so much more quicker than using the vendor's fully blown admin tool.
But that's if you only live in vCenter. I mean, the main thing is that if I'm an SME and SMB, I may live in vCenter, I may live in VCOps, I may live in my main management tool, whatever that is. And yes, I want everything connected to it. But if I'm an enterprise, vCenter is basically middleware. I'm using other things that make access use of it. If I'm using vCloud Director, vCenter is basically middleware. I want it integrated into vCloud Director's management consoles. I want it into VCOps Enterprise. I want to be able to do my runs, my backup, and everything by tenant, and let the tenants control it. So I don't necessarily want it integrated into vCenter. I want it integrated in something that understands multi-tenancy.
I think what I'm getting at is that any product that any customer buys has 100% functionality of which they only use 10 or 20% of those.
Very true. Very true. Yeah.
And it's those features that need to be presented to me in a very easy way to consume, and that's why I was interested in the plugin integration. I live in Virtual Center.
I'm starting to live in vCloud Director.
So we've gone a long way to try and make that whole process as simple, as we possibly can. So we've changed the UI to be very simplistic, very, very focused on your asset rather than the job basis that you saw in the NetBackup interface. That's very, very different. I can show you screenshots. Well, actually, we can show you.
I think we're going around in a circle here.
Yeah.
So,
The point's being made.
how many people are
on both
familiar
sides.
with backup exec and NetBackup? I mean, do you all use both?
You mean with both?
Yeah.
Familiar with both?
Familiar with both.
Only through my customers, I don't actually use it.
Okay.
I've used both for quite a few years.
So, and you're familiar with like the 2010 product, probably. So.
Have you seen the 2012 product?
Yep.
You're gonna in a minute.
You've seen it. Yeah. Can we borrow the?
Yeah. Let me just finish. I got like 2 slides. Give me 5 minutes and I'm done. I promise.
We have very little time left, George.
That gives us 8 minutes to finish.
No, well, this is, I just want, so let me just show
You're
you.
doing your presentation exactly how you described.
So this is a single file restore. So we did a backup of the virtual machine. Here's the VMDK file, and that's what's actually on our backup target. So if I want to select individual files, I simply go up here, select from the individual file. I see the directory structure, exactly how it existed at backup time, and I can select any of these, and I do that restore. When we restore the virtual machine, we have a wizard base that just walks you through the restore. It's just a couple of clicks, as few as 4 mouse clicks, and you can restore the entire virtual machine. Rename the virtual machine, send it to the location, all that stuff. And this is the plugin. I just wanted to show that briefly. This is the vSphere plugin, which is similar to ours. But that is all I'm going to show you there. And he's going to do a restore. A couple other things. I have 3 slides here. This is Op Center. It's a heat map. This shows what is happening with your master servers, how busy they are. So this gives you an idea of, like, throughout the evening how busy that master server, or I'm sorry, your media servers are. So this gives you an idea if some are underutilized, overutilized, that sort of thing. This is the benchmark, Cisco benchmark. We were able to back up at the rate of the fiber in this case. It was about 600 megabytes per second, 92 virtual machines, and a little over an hour is about a rate of about 4 terabytes an hour. And we were able to do incremental backups of virtual machines using change block tracking in 12 minutes for our 92 virtual machines, 5% data change, equivalent to about 460 VMs an hour. So that is a couple other things. VSS provider, we mentioned that. We also have a SymCQS utility. The single file restore works on Windows as well as Linux. And we actually created a utility that quiesces Linux. That does not exist within VMware tools. And so we created a utility that will actually automatically quiesce your Linux virtual machine, make sure that it's in a consistent state before the snapshot's taken. I'm done.
Thank you, George.
Thanks, guys.